So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come and join us on this panel. The title of the panel is Startup Acceleration: Route to Silicon Valley. And since I'm the moderator, I get to make the rules. And I'm going to broaden the topic a little bit because one of the things that the pandemic has shown us is that startups, it's not just about coming to the US, it's not just about going to Silicon Valley, it's about the ability to expand beyond your home and regional markets to be able to address global markets. Obviously, the US is one of the biggest markets in the world, but I'd like to broaden the discussion because I don't believe that the next logical step for startups from here in Central Asia is necessarily that you want to say, okay, I immediately want to go to the US. So quick background on myself. I'm Chris Burry. I run a group called the US Market Access Center, USMAC, out of San Francisco. We are a different kind of startup accelerator. We're very focused on how do you create great founders. And we're sort of driven by the belief that great people, great talent, great entrepreneurs are everywhere, but opportunity and resources are not. And we're trying to change that. I'm a partner with Jonathan Tower on the new fund that's being built here in Eurasia. And for fun, I teach entrepreneurship at Berkeley. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves real quickly, and then we'll kick it off. This is going to be pretty interactive. We want to have a good discussion among the panelists. This isn't me doing individual interviews. We're going to have a conversation on the topic amongst us. So I'm just going to pass the microphone down the line. So here you go.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Shireen Mukambetova. I'm the CEO of Kyrgyz Software and Services Developers Association. It's a big honor to be here with such speakers. So hope the panel will be really interesting and we'll find some good insights which will be really useful. Thank you.
Good evening, dear colleagues, friends, potential investors and partners, and maybe even employers. Thank you very much for the launching of the panel. My name is Mansur Mamajanov. I am the co-founder of Redesign.uz. We are the digital agency that's specifying in UI UX services, but before that I worked for 2 years in IT Park, Uzbekistan in international departments, specifically in international operations and investment generation. And I think, I would like to add something about this as well. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrei Tikhomirov. I'm partner with Colas Ventures, represent this company here. We are based originally in Minsk, but right now we have offices also in Kiev and Limassol most recently. We are focusing on startups at post-seed, pre-round A, round A stage, coming out of the former Soviet Union republics, Russian-speaking startups, if you will, with global aspirations. We are industry agnostics. We invest in all types of IT industry startups. More importantly, they should have a vision of becoming global players. I'm coming from investment background. My entire professional life was devoted to private equity venture capital investments. Firstly, with a bunch of private equity funds coming from the States. We were investing in the former Soviet Union. Then I used to work for 4 years at European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, again in their investment fund department, and then spent 10 years working for family office of one of Russian financial services company, Aton, managing their alternative investment portfolio.
Hello, my name is Idil Ajibayev. It's my pleasure to be here. Greetings to all, and I was really excited to see the developments that was happening in the last couple of days. It is really exciting to see the level of the speakers and the people who are attending this conference. So I'm really looking forward to see a lot of the development that is going to come from this conference. I am a founder and co-founder of a few technology startups. One of my companies registered in London, servicing the US market, is AI-based search engine for fashion products. We were number 3 in the world in terms of the size of the database for fashion products, about 20 million products. And at the time, the search technology that we had was superior to any other company. I'm currently involved in online education and consumer electronics startups, also advising startups and venture funds. Previously, I also had experience in investing. I worked for 10 years in M&A for large multinational investment funds and did over $1 billion worth of investments. And before that, I worked in the US and in Hong Kong and a few other countries, and then switched to startup world. And I'm really excited to be in this field. So I'm looking forward to exciting discussion today.
And I believe we have one guest joining us from Turkmenistan. Are you with us? There's something going on here in this region. There seems to be some kind of entrepreneurial startup impulse. And I'd like to first get sort of people's perspective on what do you think is happening here? What is making this a more special moment that we're starting to see startups that have global potential emerging from here? And if you'd like to start.
Well, I think it is helpful to understand opportunities, disadvantages, and advantages of the local market. Well, let's say about 5% of any 5% of people in any geography are highly talented people in a particular field, be it programming or a startup entrepreneurs, and the region is not an exception. There are a lot of talented people in the region. As I said, I worked for over 10 years in London, and in 2012, when I was moving to Bishkek, there was only one taxi app service in London, and it was pretty archaic. When I came here, there was about 6 or 7 services in Bishkek. I was really mind blown, and I think one of the reasons for that is scarcity is the mother of invention, and Kyrgyzstan is a relatively small economy, and it doesn't have a lot of natural resources, which forces people to be more creative. I think another factor is I believe that freedoms and liberties are strongly correlated with creativity, and free economies and free societies foster creativity much more. And relatively speaking, of course, and comparatively, Kyrgyzstan has been regarded and considered as more free society comparing to other CIS countries, and I think it definitely has helped the country to foster innovation or to foster creativity. But obviously there are a lot of challenges as well.
Yeah, I want to come back to that. I just wanted to hear people's perspective on what's driving this right now, and we'll move then to the challenges that they're facing. But I'd be curious if we can just pass the microphone down. That would be great.
Just a few words. Of course, I'm not an expert on this region. I'm just learning. That's why I'm here in the first place. But what I noticed, and that can be actually visible already from the statistics that you're reading, it's a great majority of the younger population here. So the young population wants to have all these modern things that everybody has in the world, and that drives their preferences, it drives their demands, and it would be just silly not to answer those demands. That's why the services are emerging, the products are emerging, not just from outside, that is imported, but they are demanding localized, customized products. And that's what potentially can drive the emergence of the local businesses, IT services and IT products.
Great, thank you.
Well, in addition to that, I will provide some statistics. For example, back in Uzbekistan, the population of the country is 35 million, and among this 35, 19 million of people are the youngsters. And of course, we're part of Central Asia, but nonetheless, Central Asia is a part of the global market. And we got a very late start in the development and beginning of the internet era, but still our youngsters watching to the West, watching to the new trends, technologies, and decision makers, and they try to reach their potential with individual tools. Like we all have this kind of computers with us all, and we create our own content every day, every time. And right now they want to expand this, they want to use it, and they want to travel the world and bring some their own value to the country and to their own professional growth. So basically, they want to show that countries of the Central Asia is not only oriented around some industries, but it also people who can also provide very great products, not Americans or Europeans or Australians, but we also have a talent over here.
Great, thank you.
We could understand earlier than other CA countries that IT is a really good way to become wealthy country and to develop the economy. That's why I think our IT society always eager to reach the global market, and because Kyrgyzstan obviously is a very small market, and this kind of factors that we don't have natural resources, but we have comparatively good internet penetration and young people, as my colleague said. This all factors led that IT companies and IT startups are developing now, and now is another question is how to raise a unicorn that will make Kyrgyzstan or Central Asia well known as a IT destination and as a region that able to make such products.
So if I just sort of sum up from what I'm hearing from people is it's a combination of there is a high density of youth who through the internet are aware of everything that's going on everywhere else. And so they hear about startups, they see all of these things. It sounds like there's also sort of a necessity component in terms of, you know, that there's not these other industries. I'd be curious though, I'll start back with you as probably with the most local knowledge. I'd be curious if you named two things. I mean, each of us could talk for an hour on blocking factors, things that slow the startups down. But what do you think are the two things right now that if you have a brilliant founder with a great idea, you know, in this region, what are the things that are slowing them down, that are keeping them from being able to become that unicorn that you just talked about?
We made a small research among our members, and we found out that our companies have very good technical level, but they suffer from lack of entrepreneurship skills, and they cannot scale up that fast that we wanted to. And I think our education system model is more, the focus of the education system is more about technical skills, and entrepreneurship and business skills need to be developed. And I think this is one of the factors. But we have some compatriots from Kyrgyzstan who founded several good startups that raised good money. I mean, in terms of Central Asia scale, like OutTalent, FeedJab, B12, and this kind of startups proves that we have talented people who are able to go global and make unicorns. So I think just we need some time to level up our entrepreneurship and marketing skills, and we will reach that level. Thank you.
Yeah. Additional thoughts?
Yeah, I agree that every startup requires a good salesperson, because we don't get the idea that the sales and the production should be separated in the company. Sometimes, just in case of redesign, I started 1 year ago with 8 guys, and it was still that's kind of small company, but the production goes to the rest of the 7. Right now I'm more focused on selling the services in the right direction, because the right selling is what defined companies from each other. We all can code very well. We all can draw the applications very well. But how we sell those services, no matter where we are in the world, it depends on the communication skills and how you sell it. And one more thing is opportunity of crowdfunding.
So a funding and a skills gap, but you see the skills gap as being primarily in the sales and marketing space.
Yes, we got a lot of brilliant guys that can code, but a very few amount of people who can sell them and help them to
Okay.
raise awareness.
Great.
Just a few comments. Obviously, go-to-market is one thing. In a way, people before me, answered this question. But I think another thing is that what is lacking here is the startup capital, pools of capital available to or support them at least very early stage. Because very few people understand, first of all, what technology means, what this particular product or service means. They don't see any value. They see only risks rather than opportunities or upside, as we call it. And that's why it's very difficult to convince them to invest. There are no venture capital per se, capitalists per se, or very, very few maybe distinguished people who can be qualified as venture capital investors. It's growing. The number is growing definitely in Kazakhstan in particular, but in this particular country, probably very rare example of such capital support that can be found. But it will change.
So you would just hone in on early, like first, second check kind of money. Okay. Beyond friends and family.
Well, if you want to grow a flower, if you want to grow a garden, you need to have a soil. And I think soil in our case consists of a few different factors, and I would mention the three major ones, the financing, and then, great marketable world level ideas, and access to expertise and human capital. Starting from financing, historically it has been extremely relatively very difficult to get financing if you are a founder from the local region. For Kyrgyzstan, for example, I raised a few rounds of financing for my own startups, but it was in London, in Belgium, in Europe, in Silicon Valley, and I've done it through the London jurisdiction and through the London office. And when you mentioned Kyrgyzstan, historically, investors were kind of wary because the country lacks international recognition. It's starting to change now. There are 3 or 4 international VC companies, and we've heard yesterday, great news that from Jonathan Tower that a new VC is entering the market, which is great news. So the market is shifting. The ice is melting, and in a good way this time, and that's. The companies are starting to get more access to financing, but over the last 10 years, it hasn't been the case. Even in 2-3 years ago, it wasn't the case. It's only just starting, it's just emerging. So that's the first factor. The second factor is, ideas, world-class ideas. If you want to build a global unicorn, you need to be close to the market. You need to understand market demand. You need to understand customer pain points. You need to understand consumer behavior. And if you have not been close to any of those markets, it's really difficult to find and propose solutions. It's not always the case. Sometimes you just have outstanding superior technology and you are able to expand it and offer it to the whole world. And for that, you also need expertise. You need to have outstanding human resources, and I think that is also partially a problem here, because we definitely do have highly talented people, but a lot of companies are competing for them, and the competition is not only local but global. We've heard international players yesterday. We've heard that more huge international players entering the market. It means there's going to be even more competition. And as I said, competition is global, and a lot of local talent who is highly talented, when they reach certain level, they leave the country. I was lucky enough to hire some of the most talented people, train them, and we were building artificial intelligence products. But it's rather exception. It's becoming very difficult to find this kind of people, because it's a very tough, fierce competition for the talent as well.
So you have sort of a unique position in the sense of you sort of personally have bridged here and London and New York and so forth. Some of the research that's been done by, like by Startup Compass and some others talks about the importance of global connectedness. I'd be interested in your thoughts on, what could be done to create sort of deeper connections out of not just Kyrgyzstan, but the whole Central Asia region, to be able to have that connectivity into the markets. Because if you don't have the connectivity into the markets, you can't know the customer, right? Yeah. So I'd be curious as to your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, when you are in, Palo Alto and going to the cafe, and like there are a lot of serendipities. You just, happen to see to somebody who happens to know somebody, and then I mean, these kind of things that don't happen as often here, and so that is one of the problems. Another is that most of the founders, local founders, are people who went to the Western markets or other countries. They had they've learned, they worked somewhere else, they learned about the market, and then they came back and they implement these kind of solutions in the local markets. So I think event like this is a great venue for people to exchange ideas, but also different exchange programs. People traveling to other countries. There should be a neosphere, like a knowledge sphere, where a lot of stakeholders are able to touch each other, exchange ideas, motivate each other with their own ideas, with their business startups. Because when you hear 10 successful startup stories, all of a sudden the idea pops into your mind, to create the 11th one. And before you have that soil, it's more difficult to grow.
So it's that creating of role models, right? The people look at it and say, hey, I could do that. I would want to be, I could do that.
Absolutely, it's role model, but it's also creating the soil, as I was explaining at the beginning. Like Estonia is a good example. The beginning of 90s, Russia hacked into the Estonian governments, and it's motivated them to invest heavily into IT. And then, as a result, they had initial start of startup ecosystem, and then they had Skype, and it was the first unicorn, and it created a lot of millionaires who started investing money. But it also created a bunch of highly expertized people, and programmers, and from that, a lot of startups started growing. So that's the soil that I'm referring to. So we need to have more soil here.
So Andrei, I'd be curious as to your thoughts on both this question of the global connectedness and the importance of sort of these role models, right?
It's certainly important, but I wouldn't go too far, speaking of globalism and sort of global outreach, because the neighboring markets are still there. They are still big. Think of China, think of Central Asia, think of South Asia rather, Southeast Asia. Think of the MENA region, for example. These are much bigger in terms of population regions than the United States, Europe combined, for God's sake, right? Yes, definitely, the population there is not that affluent in terms of money and maybe their taste, but still they're hungry for basic services. And if the services and products can be catered to their needs, and I think that the local needs are better served from the neighbors because they understand better the culture and the language, the religious beliefs, and so on and so forth. I think you can think about Silicon Valley as being closer to you, for God's sake. I mean, because you can see such examples of prospering startups that become unicorns in a much closer proximity to you. I mean, think of the Persian Gulf companies, the startups that emerged there, unicorns. I mean, there's a growing number of such unicorns, and that can be also role models. That
also in Southeast Asia, you've got a whole bunch. So you're saying, sort of what I was talking about at the very beginning, is it's not necessarily about how do you make the jump from here to London or San Francisco or whatever, but to be
it's
able
in
to,
your mind.
It's in your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the role model question? Your thoughts?
All right. I think it's extremely important. I just a few minutes ago met one person who is the founder of the company. And maybe people in the audience know this company, at least the ones from Central Asia. The company is called Namba. Raise your hands who know the company. All right, here he is. All right. So I'm really excited that I got acquainted with this such a fantastic person that created basically out of nowhere, even before some of the larger companies in the countries that I know better, Russia, for example, created something that can be called ecosystem. It's a company. It's a super app that he showed me just a few minutes ago that unites everything you can think of that can service your needs. When you have to buy something, you have to buy the tickets, you can buy the services, you can pay for those services, or you can actually get to the state services, for God's sake, or medical services, whatever. And it's expanding, constantly expanding the outreach to different kinds of services. And that service is not only just this particular country, but the neighbor country. You can probably find this, right? You can use this application in the neighbor country like Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, or even Georgia. It can be localized anywhere because so universe. And that's what you call role model. If you have such a person around you, or more persons around you, and if you can actually publicize it in a good way, that such person exists, and use their successes as role models, that could be really, really driving momentum, for a lot of younger people, do something similar. The success of such ventures actually can bring, that's another important point, can bring more capital. If venture capitalists see such examples, local unicorns or gazelles, as we saw them, sort of younger generation of unicorns can become unicorns, that definitely can bring more capital to this country, to this region as a whole. That's also important from this perspective.
Great, thank you.
So basically, I believe that the current problem is the closed doors that we're having on the places where they should be opened.
Can you give us an example?
For example, I'm working beyond the first job on American logistic company in the sales department, and we are required to find new clients for our business of dispatching. And we generate our CRM system by using, for example, Clutch. From that website, we're getting the first information data, emails, numbers, and we can call them directly and say, hello, how are you doing? We are that guys, we are that company, we provide such kind of services. And we know our audience. We can reach individually to each and one of them. But locally in Central Asia, you need to know someone in the higher places or in the company in order to reach to the right person that to make the pitch and show your skills, competence, and what you can bring to the table eventually. And speaking about the closed doors, during my work in IT Park alongside with the Chubak and other colleagues under the guidance of Yelena Solom from American Uzbek Chamber of Commerce, we discussed the opportunity of creation the Central Asian IT hub that will be represented in Silicon Valley, that will provide this key for the door that everyone wants to knock, and to go together as team players and not the competitors, because in that case we have much more chances to associate ourselves with better services and good quality. Right now, individually, we're all trying to beat Ukraine, Belarus, India in the IT sector. But it's impossible, because if we will move forward in 50 years, there will be 100 years ahead of us. So we need to change our focus on something else. And one of the good examples of association is, we all know that India is very good for programming. But right now, for example, Uzbekistan is very good for dispatching. Quick statistics in America right now, there are 6 million trucks. 3 million is constantly in the movement, and among them approximately 700,000 trucks are under the Uzbekistan control. So could you imagine that students from Uzbekistan could help the American logistics to run, specifically in the pandemic times? So to sum up, the working on association of the market and the decision of the closed doors dilemma. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to continue on some thoughts, and it's my own that as a Central Asia region, we need to be unified because nobody knows Kyrgyzstan, for example, in terms of global market, and we came up to this idea that we need to build this IT hub, and KSSDA as a first step, we initiated a project which is called IT Tours, where we want our IT companies to meet with Central Asian, Uzbek, and Kazakh colleagues. So we made a first tour to Tashkent and visited IT Park. So there are some collaboration appearing in this frame of this project, and of course. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is a larger markets rather than Kyrgyzstan, but since we have more expertise in exporting IT outsource, I think we can be really helpful to each other. And only when we realize that we can go together and reach the global market, and we can become more competitive. For example, really hard to compete with India, such markets as India, China, and etc. But we have to find our uniqueness because everybody tried to copy Silicon Valley ecosystem, but it's impossible. And we need to find our uniqueness, and it should be something really different and which will be really distinguished. And now we're searching for it, so I hope we'll find it, and it will help. As for Kyrgyzstan IT society, I can say that we are really creative, and we have a lot of good content makers who, for example, YouTubers who won the diamond, this diamond button, and this kind of examples increasing, and we're really happy that we do have some soil for raising this kind of creative people, and of course we should be more open to the whole market, and I think it's I wouldn't be really original if I say that we should be more democratic, I mean, as it turns in the country. So thank you.
So we're rapidly closing in on the end of the time. But what I'd like to ask each of you is really, in a very clear, succinct way. In the audience here at this conference, yes, we have some great founders and so forth, but we also have a lot of people involved in government and policy and the donor community and so forth. If we want to look at helping startups from this region go global, and again, not just to Silicon Valley or wherever, but to MENA, to Southeast Asia, around here in the region, to the rest of Eastern Europe, wherever, Africa, really quickly, one or two things that you would ask the policymakers and the funders that are in the room to consider as being priority items that need to be addressed. And I'll let you go first.
I think the legal base is the last thing. This is not the last thing, but it's not that important, I think, because to be honest, we should admit that it's very hard to change the image of stand country, and even we built a really good legal base for IT community and startup ecosystem, we cannot get rid of this image, and we should focus more on education, on building Central Asian community, and I think this will help more than building a legal base, because you can build legal base today, and tomorrow the technology will change, and you should make another law. So it's kind of waste of time, and that's why we think more about human capital. So.
Great. Thank you. You pass the microphone down.
Well, first of all, is the taxation for the startup companies to, of course, the technoparks help with the decrease of those kind of things that it's scared of the majority of people to start the business is the taxation and the lack of guidance how to start and where to go. So from my perspective, the best way from the government representatives and from venture capitals is to provide initial guidelines for those who wish to build something unique but really scared to do it because he or she doesn't know where to go, where to start, and how to communicate and actually pitch their ideas. That's very important, to provide guidance, to be more mentors than judge. The second one is 1 year disclosure for startups in order to accelerate the budget for those guys who will be willingly help them to promote them and help to sell their services. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's several things that I would point out are number one, I mean, from the legal side, obviously taxation is important, but I think that the legal regime should be flexible. We don't need to change the constitution, for God's sake, or any basic laws, but create the sandboxes, so to say. Let people experiment with different things, especially in the areas, sensitive areas, like data security, like financial services, like healthcare services. But it's important, and especially those personal data security. The rules have to be waived, somehow amended when we talk about, you know, the things which can help, for example, to cure chronic diseases, like in this case, in the COVID case, for example. There are ways how to get around this personal security issues and in terms of data. But data is important. It's bread and butter, you know, for a lot of business, for a lot of technologies. Without that, it's impossible to create a meaningful algorithm if we're talking about machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's one thing. Second thing, obviously, it's all related to infrastructure in global terms, in general terms, but education. Education is very important because it lays the groundwork for future generation of start-uppers and advanced sort of thinking, young people, and that's only the state can do. I mean, the educational thing, it's entirely, almost entirely under the umbrella of the state. Yes, there are definitely, you know, private schools, but they cannot change the tide. Definitely, the state has to play a bigger role here.
Great. So you seem to get the last word.
Right. I started and I'm finishing it. Well, I think the number one thing is if we are giving sort of like hints or advice to the government officials is just not to be an obstacle. I think it's just the number one thing. We are in the age of exponential growth. The technology is growing not linearly but algorithmically. So if we moved from Bishkek to Tashkent in 1 hour, we may assume that in the next hour we are going to move from Tashkent to Almaty. But in the next hour we are going to move from Tashkent to the moon, and in the next hour from the moon to the sun. The world is technology is growing exponentially, and if we just leave the markets as they are now, a lot of good things are going to happen. And just if we are talking about just a few things that government could do, one is perhaps we have a very good legal terms for in IT park in Kyrgyzstan, and it will be great if those remain and if government continues to support them. We really hope that liberties and freedoms remain and improve in the region, because it really does foster innovation in the region. And I just also wanted to talk, just say a couple of words about the opportunities, because we talked about a lot of challenges, a lot of problems, but we have great opportunities. The world technology is growing exponentially, but also the emerging markets are digitalizing. it's a very big wave. All like Kyrgyzstan, all Central Asia, Eurasia is getting really digitalized. So it's happening. And it's a very big force, and whether government influences it or not, I mean, it is happening. So it's a very good opportunity, and especially for this region and for Kyrgyzstan. Also, comparing to, I mean, obviously we all understand the benefits of being in Silicon Valley and in other startup hubs, but being in Kyrgyzstan or in Central Asia, it's a lower cost base, and so it means lower cash burn rate. It means lower runway. You can experiment more. You can, with the team and expenses that you have, you can experiment. You can run many more experiments, and you can pivot and survive. So that's another great opportunity. And within this emerging digitalization of emerging markets, I think the region does have a lot of great opportunities.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, panel, for your time. We've got, I guess, a 10-minute break before the next set of breakouts. Thank you all for sharing your day with us. We hope it was helpful and informative. Thank you very much.